Time now for World Watchers International with Mae Brussell, who for over 17 years has investigated and exposed political conspiracies worldwide. World Watchers International originates at KLRB, Carmel, California. Here's Mae.
Good evening. This is Mae Brussell in Carmel, California. It's broadcast number 470, December the 7th, 1980, the anniversary of Pearl Harbor, and I'll have a few comments to make about that later on in the program. 18 days left until Christmas, 4 weeks more, until the new year. I get philosophical this time of year, winding up one year, getting ready for the next. Combination of a lot of research and Christmas festivities, Hanukkah, and so forth. And I think of imagine what the next year will be like, and I look back and think of what we did the past year or the years that add up too quickly. What was the world like in 1980? How will we remember it when we're older? Many people take these tapes and tape record the programs, have for years, going back 9 years, some people. Will you play them for future generations? Will you put them away and listen to them? Will our technology make the earth a better place? Are we using it properly? Why does everything seem to be going wrong? Who are the people abusing instruments and planet Earth? What do they intend to do when they use up the clean air and the facilities in the ocean, the free fish and sea life by polluting it with atomic waste, using up energy? Who are these people? And what instruments do they use to ruin our lives and other people's lives? How much power, I ask myself, do they really have in their hands? And how much weakness is in ours that we turn over to them, that they're not really that strong if we wanted to halt some of their insanity? Are dictators at fault, the military junta that takes over? Or do we give them what they want because they know we can be easily pacified and we're lazy? Or do we even have the ability to think about the problems and take care of ourselves? Do we learn by the lessons of past history? Or do we learn anything at all from history that can make life better? And what are misdirected conceptions of past failures? Why haven't we used them, and why are we repeating them over and over again? Is it inevitable that we have to keep repeating the old mistakes and we can't learn from these? Will we depend on machines and computers to take away our ability to do things by ourselves? That's another problem. We'll get so lazy. How long can you hold on to those things that you can do to make your own life meaningful? Is there any way out of the obvious direction that we're heading, or are you prepared to face what comes as easily as the Jews who took off all their clothing and believed that after the showers they were going to get their job assignments? Is there any value in exposing injustices? Is there any hidden payoff for being alert and sensitive to political forces around you? There's sometimes articles or cartoons or saying how to sit back and enjoy the bomb. You can even make money out of being aware of what's going on in the world. Even with the badness around, you can turn your instincts into becoming wealthy if you want, just by being afraid and knowledgeable of the forces of evil. I bought land in Canada 10 years ago because I was afraid of Richard Nixon. And after Reagan came in 2 months ago, the property increased 4 times over. And in fact, it doubled everywhere up there. How to become a millionaire just worrying about Nixon and Reagan. You can go up there, you could have bought land for $100 an acre, and it's thousands and thousands of dollars now. People who were afraid of them turned that fear into a huge profit. Are you going to have a good year in 1981? And how is your self-respect and self-identity and your own knowledge that you did everything you could to stop this insanity? Nuclear insanity, military insanity, medical experimentation and injustices continuing, mind experiments, dictatorships, continuous torture, genocide, rape, murder, racism, fascism, the mob, organized crime moving in tighter to the White House every day. I don't know if you can do anything about it. I don't know if I can, but we try. I had an interesting week. I met a former member of the Senate from Indiana. He and his wife came up from San Diego to visit with me. He was working on the organized crime mafia infiltration into the state of Indiana, which he claims is the heart of organized crime in the United States. From Indiana, close to Chicago, Illinois, it reaches to Illinois, Miami, New Orleans, Cleveland, Kansas City, San Francisco, New Jersey, and Los Angeles. That the hub and the heart is Indiana. And he was working with Robert Kennedy to expose Sam Giancana, who months later would be part of the assassination team that killed John Kennedy. And after John and Robert Kennedy were killed, he left Indiana and came to California and opened a stamp and coin shop. That's his hobby, has been for years. And he went to the Nixon Library at San Clemente that we taxpayers pay for and copied many, many documents for me. He was very generous. He brought a carload of documents that he gave to me, and others I copied as fast as I could. Links of E. Howard Hunt with Richard Nixon in the early days in the 50s, and of Clint Murchison and Nixon, and a dialogue that suggested we'll do everything to stop John Kennedy the next time around. It was pre-assassination vocabulary, and on programs later this year, or maybe the first of next year, I'll begin to share these with you. There was an article in the newspaper this week, convictions reversed in the Wilmington 10 case. That was a case that went on in Richmond, Virginia. It was an injustice. Men were convicted of a firebombing they said they didn't do. 9 black men and 1 white woman. And they were finally released. There was attention drawn to them through Amnesty International and various people on human rights and violations right here in the United States. One of the quotations from a man involved in this case, a prosecutor, said, "I'm flabbergasted at the reversal, but frankly not that surprised once I found out who the judges were on the panel." Once they heard the case again and had a favorable judge, the case was reversed. And one of the persons involved said, in quotes, "The case has gone on for almost a decade, and the only reason why the court finally reversed our convictions was because of tremendous amount of pressure from justice-loving people all over the world." So people do matter. Geronimo Pratt's appeal, he was falsely imprisoned. He's still in prison, allegedly for killing a woman in Santa Monica. That appeal was turned down. Hugo Pinnell is serving a life sentence for killing a guard at Soledad that he didn't kill. There will be reversals in these cases. When people care, when you care about something, another thing happens, and you have to realize that your lives are not wasted when you work on these cases or support Amnesty International or help these people psychologically, or the support systems, the mail they send out, send them a few dollars from around the country, and they're now out of prison. I read the newspapers every day, lots of them, and I still am in a state of shock about Ronald Reagan being president. I just want to run down, maybe I should do it once a week when I begin the program, the links of Reagan and the people around him to the political assassinations that I've studied for so many years. He covered up the California links, and there were strong California links to the murder of John Kennedy, and of course Robert Kennedy was murdered right in Los Angeles. A former chief of police, Ed Davis, the man of the criminal conspiracy section in L.A. that was so painful to so many innocent people and caused so many deaths, is going to be taking the oath as state senator in California. Arlen Inspector of the Warren Commission is now going to be a senator from Pennsylvania. Evel Younger, the Attorney General of California, the DA who prosecuted Sirhan, who worked hand in glove with Ed Davis and Reagan, is part of the transition team. Senator Howard Baker, who, according to William Colby's correspondence, was a CIA snitch to Nixon through the entire Watergate investigations, is the House Majority Leader. John J. McCloy of his law firm is moving to Washington, D.C., in addition to New York. He was a member of the Warren Commission. He's now giving advice to Ronald Reagan. and he was in charge of suppressing the information of Lee Harvey Oswald being a United States intelligence agent in the Soviet Union. John Cooper of the Warren Commission is also an advisor to Ronald Reagan at this time and was photographed in the Washington Post with John J. McCloy. Leon Jaworski of the Warren Commission is one of the advisors to the Reagan team. Senator John Tower of Texas, who was corresponding with Lee Oswald to bring Marina to the United States and waving her papers to get here, is now going to have a high place on the cabinet of Ronald Reagan. John Tower is the brother-in-law of Samuel Cummings, notorious arms merchant of the world, CIA also, who funds paramilitary counterintelligence to every single country in the entire globe to encourage them to fight against each other. And, of course, John Connally, who arranged the trip for John Kennedy to Dallas, Texas, is going to try to squeeze in a cabinet post. Richard Allen, who's worked with the CIA, and Robert Vesco. Vesco was linked to the California, Texas, Washington mob, organized crime, CIA troop that did the assassinations of John and Robert Kennedy. Allen was receiving $10,000 a month from Vesco. He was on Issues and Answers today, and it will be on the Reagan cabinet. And it goes on and on. The story of who killed John Kennedy is very much linked to those people in power taking oath of office soon, and it is sickening. And, of course, Paul Laxalt, representing the Howard Hughes organization, which was the umbrella for the assassination teams, will be the chief advisor to Ronald Reagan and the notorious Richard Nixon, who spent the evening before John Kennedy was murdered with J. Edgar Hoover and Clint Murchison Jr., giving the final okays to murder the man that he lost the election to in 1960, is a constant source of giving advice to Ronald Reagan. And don't forget Gerald Ford, the former president, who pardoned Nixon of all possible and future crimes, who was a member of the Warren Commission. If you don't understand why I've studied the Kennedy assassination for 17 years and the Robert Kennedy assassination since 1968, it's because these people are getting power and more power and being sworn into places of power on the bones and ashes of these dead political representatives who spoke for the people more actually than the corporations, and who spoke against organized crime and pollution and the nuclear test ban treaty and so forth. So maybe every week I should just read a litany of those assassins who have gained power, and then you'll understand where they're going now in the future. There's a book out called California Rich by Stephen Birmingham. It's a new book, and it gives you an idea about power and power in California. I had to fight so much, people asking me and interviewing me in radio talk shows and articles about what do you think about the Trilateral Commission, what do you think about the Council of Foreign Relations. The power, I always answered, came from California, just as the organized crime syndicate head or heart came from Indiana. And this book describes the rich in California and the skullduggery and what went on in California. Just a blurb of the book describes Edward Doheny, who brought in the state's first oil gusher, was the only man implicated in the Teapot Dome scandal who didn't go to jail. It tells how Mr. Spreckles won a large part of his sugar kingdom at a game, and how Mrs. Reagan, when she went to Sacramento, when her husband was a governor, had never been up there, and she had to fly to Beverly Hills once a week because no one in Sacramento can do hair, and it goes into the railroad people, the Huntingtons and the Hopkins and Stanfords and the Hearsts and so forth. California is where the Bank of Italy became the Bank of America. Mr. Giannini, and now the president of Bank of America, is president of the World Bank. This is the home of the Hoover Institute that's going to direct, along with its sister branch, the George Washington University, the policies that we're going to take us right into World War III. This is the home of Whittier, California, of Richard Nixon, of the Sirhan family that was brought by the CIA to Pasadena, the home of Ronald Reagan, of Rand Corporation, of an insane persons such as Howard Hughes and use aircraft as the umbrella for organized crime and the assassination teams, the Silicon Valley, the computers, the space program up and down the area between San Jose and San Francisco, Shirley Temple, Black and Fantasyland and Disneyland. I've gone over this before when I talked about from Mr. Lamott's book on California, the first para-fascist state. But in order to understand 1981 or 82, now that Ronald Reagan is president, following on the heels of Richard Nixon, you have to know more about California, the Palm Springs meetings, the home of Mr. Annenberg and Gerald Ford on the board of directors of 20th Century Fox now with Grace Kelly, and La Costa, the great institution in San Diego with Mo Dalitz and C. Arnholt Smith, and the Hollywood studios, the Nazi Gestapo connections in Warner Brothers and MGM and 20th Century Fox and RKO. California is an amazing state that has not yet been analyzed with its influence all over the world, but the power brokers are here, and the fantasy land and the entertainment is here. And in between here and Wall Street, there are very many decisions that the American people can make themselves. I put down a few headlines just as an overview of what we can expect in 1981. And these headlines are just from this week and last week. They're all dated from November the 26th until December the 7th today, just to give an idea of what's going on in some countries, and we'll get a view of next year. Crime, I'll just run them off, and they come from the Washington Post, New York Times, Monterey Herald, and so forth. Crime increase, putting strains on the Irish police. Broad wave of arrests underway in Haiti. Haiti, shaken by economic plight, cracks down on prominent critics. Rightist offensive seen in Central America. The Jewish question in France. Nazi bombings and killings. Police blinding prisoners in India with ice picks and pouring acid in their eyes. China assails Reagan's advisor, CIA Ray Klein. China suspects Reagan and trouble with the mainland. OAS delegates prod the Six Nations on human rights performances. This is coming out of Madrid. Israel assails the rise of anti-Semitism at the European Conference. World outrage may not be enough to spare Kim Dae-jung. Now, if Kim Dae-jung is killed in Korea, I seriously believe that I will begin to take the steps to leave this country. There is so much you can take and be American, but this man is similar to Gandhi and Martin Luther King, and if they murder him in Korea, I really think I will have had enough. U.S.-Brazil relations faulted. Brazil says, mind your own business. Amsterdam cops battle squatters. U.S. considers sending arms to Jordan to quiet the war threat. Rise of tough young Army officers dims the fate of SEAL dissidents. This is again Korea. TASS accuses Brzezinski of pushing for revolt in Poland. Lon Knowles' $1 million fund questioned. He took $1 million when he fled Cambodia. U.S. doubts that the invasion of Poland is imminent. We may not go in there right away, but we may go later. U.S. Western European leaders consider food aid for Poland. King Hussein urges the United States to speed delivery of arms for Jordan. Rightist Salvador coup termed possible. Japanese role in NATO security urged. We need more Japanese arms for NATO. Our national honor is at stake. We should have no dealings with Iran until it frees the 52. Then there's another article, we should start sending arms to Iran. Latin American poverty deepens. 3 in Pretoria, South Africa, face a hanging. This is for an ambush. Nobody was killed, but it's like the Steve Bilko case. 3 are going to be hung, but nobody was harmed, and the trial proved they didn't touch anybody. They're going to be hung. West Germans upset by Allied scrutiny of their role in defense. Gaddafi on the verge of significant military win in Chad. Somali seeks arms from reluctant U.S. Washington fears that sending arms would alienate black African allies. Schmidt in Germany urges the pursuit of arms control talks. He's getting a little nervous over there. Caribbean ally may confront Reagan with early tests on military aid. Barbados has elections next spring. Will Reagan help them? Jamaican leader cites Reagan's opportunity. Now that they have control of the government, the White House, and the CIA, they'll begin the World Bank to send money to Jamaica. That was after 175 deaths to make the election possible. Israel's black Hebrews raise troublesome questions. They're not accepted by the white Jews. Spaniards hold a rally in honor of Franco. Misery cities, refugees in Somali, hunger, crowded homes, large article in the New York Times. South Korea arrests. 1,210 were arrested, 67 publications closed down. Canada lifts the grain embargo on the Soviet Union after 10 months of obeying the United States. Canada, the country that sold and traded with Red China, Cuba, and Russia since World War II, now has said the United States, forget it. They have no enemies on planet Earth, and they don't want any. Uganda famine. Fathers give food, solace to tribesmen. Thousands are dying and starving there. China's new rash of human rights abuses. This is on torture and concentration camps. Coup in Upper Volta ousts the elected leader. Military power takes over without violence. This is a country with an annual income of $110. They have manganese, but the World Bank will not give them the money until the coup takes place. Once the military leader is in, we'll build it up, just as we held back money from Jamaica. New military rulers in Turkey. They'll keep the mullahs in the mosques, and Turkey is starting its repressions. West German military, the center of controversy, fears of World War II militarism. Now, these are just this week's newspapers. I didn't go back for the other 52 weeks during the year. I'm just reading to you at the end of 1980 what the headlines look like. Arctic City, prime target for NATO missile strike. Soviet military center. Thatcher's conservative policies failed to revive the economy. Botha, the Prime Minister of South Africa, warns of folly of sanctions. U.S. stay away. South Africa and Brazil have told us to shove it, get out of our lives. Inflation, debt, spiral in Brazil, singeing the banks and consumers. In Paris, here's another headline. In Paris, the Battle of Le Monde heats up. That's the newspaper that has had various reporters arrested, that is investigating the crimes and conspiracies of Giscard d'Estaing and the French government. This is the only free newspaper in Paris. It's the only one where the people of any intelligence can get information, and there's a controversy on Le Monde. In Tin Town, water is often scarce, a large story about South Africa. Another a big story, amid South Africa of plenty, hunger rules. Another story on Turkey. Turkish town is poor amid riches of history. Turkey attempts to put freedom in its place and have less democracy. A who's who, another article, a who's who of persecuted people and much more. Amnesty International conference in London, while the other one was going on in Madrid. Percy warns Soviets not to use force in Poland. Another one, police and followers still remember Yukio Mishima. Mishima died November 26, 1970. 10 years ago, he built a private army, designed uniforms, and so forth. He was an extreme rightist like Franco, who didn't like the humiliation of defeat, an avid fascist who commit hara-kiri. Air Force planes not big enough to transport Army's new tanks. That's the United States. Another long story on Imelda Marcos, the Philippines iron butterfly, and a quotation, "The little people want a star." She's very much like Evita Peron, and she gives them what they want. Another story, the U.S. may deliver arms to Iran as demanded. Another one, use force against Iran, a former citizen urges. Thirst for violence spreads over Great Britain. Another one, Romania, without cash to buy Western goods, is turning to barter. Another, a scandal is created by a book on Australian foreign policy. This book has been suppressed and stopped. It tells about the United States using bases in Australia, using land, and not allowing the Australians to know what it was for. Now, a lot of the Australian bases go down to Antarctic and also for the space program and intelligence and storing atomic weapons. We've used that country, and now somebody's come out with a book, but so far we can't get in the United States. Zimbabwe needs skilled workers. An article about that country, rich in asbestos, silver, coal, nickel, tin, copper, cobalt, and 31 other minerals. The truth is that under Africa are so many minerals, it's unbelievable. This is the wealth of the world that hasn't been tapped. And the purpose of stalling off developing the minerals is to put in the military ruling class in every country and not give them independence. When a country like Zimbabwe gets its independence before the goodies are dug out, they can't get the skilled workers to get it out. And just as in other countries, Jamaica, or where we hold back, or in Guyana, we hold back until Burnham does what we want, and then we pull out the bauxite. Last one, an article, Colombia and South America, violence and riches mark Colombia's bizarre emerald business, and it tells about their necessity to deal with the mob. The government has a ringleader of gangs, and they have bloody wars, and they have these very, very wealthy people waiting to dig out the emeralds in Colombia, in addition to the narcotics traffic. They described somebody who works in these mines, a Japanese James Bond, a 46-year-old person who he only wears one pistol, and the people working in the emerald mines are loaded with pistols on the front, the back, the pockets, and the vest. And there's an article in the San Jose Mercury last week, and one of the people working there said, I wear one pistol. If they killed Kennedy, they can kill me. And he said, I find you can avoid problems if you have a gun and produce it at the right time. Now, this person knows they killed Kennedy, but the mob is working for emeralds there. Well, every country, Iran, Romania, South America, Brazil, London, Jordan, King Hussein in Jordan, Iran, the United States builds airplanes, the tanks don't fit. We're talking about confronting Russia, Poland, or bombing their bases up in the Arctic. There are questions here of what is going wrong. These are just the foreign headlines, some that caught my eye just in 1 week, and I have to put them in a pile and read them and look at them. What went wrong and what is going wrong? Well, what is going wrong, I believe, pinpoints back to those days when World War I was over, when we began to arm Germany for World War II to try and stop the Soviet Union from becoming a communist nation. And then, more recently, what happened at the end of World War II, where we took Hitler's chief of intelligence and he formed our CIA, and all those decisions that they made of the Cold War are those things that are bringing us to bankruptcy and destruction today. In the book on Galen, the book The General Was a Spy, you, Trevor Roper, asked the question in the introduction of that book, what was the result of the Secret Service of Hitler joining the United States government, working for the setting up the CIA, and then being head of German intelligence, this Nazi? Trevor Roper said, any Secret Service justifies itself by its results. How well did Galen, in fact, serve his Western masters? Did he do what he was supposed to do, or was the job of Galen a failure? And I believe that we have to look at the old team from Herbert Hoover on up through Truman, Eisenhower, and the Dulles brothers, and the State Department up through today, and particularly those behind Reagan, because they made every mistake possible, and now those old dogs, these 60, 70-year-old men, are going to make your decisions for the future. It's absolutely frightening that people that made so many errors, that bring so many people to the brink of death and torture and exploitation and poverty, are going to go into this administration again. The John J. McCloys, the John Coopers, the Richard Nixons, the Leon Jaworskis, Albert Jenners, you name it, the John Collins, the whole team of advisors, Richard Allen and so forth, the whole gang behind this new administration are the same ones that have festered other countries, brought so much poverty and exploitation and hatred towards us in America. Well, I think this is the end of the first half hour. We're going to turn the tape over for those of you that record this, and I'll be back with you in about 60 seconds.
This concludes the first half of World Watchers International with Mae Brussell. We will return with the second half after a brief pause.
Spiraling inflation, acute shortage of housing, bitter labor disputes were complicated by rumblings of the Cold War with Russia. A menace more frightening than Nazism was seen by many as threatening our way of life. And therefore, it goes on to say that we should get ready for the Cold War because Russia was more menacing than Nazism. By 1946, Reinhard Gehlen had been in the United States 1 year, turning the OSS into the Central Intelligence Agency. The article from the Dallas Times-Herald on Pearl Harbor today begins with, let me just read you a few sentences. Honolulu. They came over the mountains down Diamond Head on their mission of death. They sunk the Arizona and the Oklahoma and the Utah. They killed 2,403 civilian soldiers, Marines. And they left with their first American blood of World War II oozing on the sands of early morning in Hawaii. It was 39 years ago today. Now, there's been new history books and documents to prove that Franklin Roosevelt knew in advance that Pearl Harbor was happening. J. Edgar Hoover was in correspondence with people. The military knew. The responsibility for Pearl Harbor was in Washington, D.C., and as long as history is written by Michael Carlton for the Dallas Times-Herald or the encyclopedias or anybody else, you can't set history right. If you don't know the United States armed Hitler and armed Japan, that we sent them the scrap metal, that we sent them everything that they needed because we hoped they would keep going into Manchuria and be a bulwark against Russia. And we knew when they were coming to get us as an excuse to get us into that war. We knew about Pearl Harbor, and we allowed 2,403 civilian soldiers, Marines, and sailors to be killed. It wasn't they alone. It takes two to tango. It always did, and it always will. There's a new book out. I just got it this week. A great book, it looks like. Heinrich Kruger, The Great Heron Coup. It briefly hits into all the bases that I've been doing for 17 years. The link of fascists to narcotic traffic, to colonial dignitat and the assassination teams, to Nazis and bank robberies that financed them, to Mitchell Wirbel and his silencers, to Robert Vesco. It hits so many bases. I won't go into it now, but it also goes into the subject that I was doing on my radio tapes before I came back to KLRB in the past year when the men were taken hostage in Iran and the Shah left. And I've described constantly and consistently the narcotic war going on at the top levels, that when you get Richard Nixon or Jimmy Carter, or in this case Ronald Reagan versus Jimmy Carter, what you're getting is two mob chieftains fighting for turf. One cuts off Turkey in 1971 and said, you can't grow the poppy when the people there support themselves by it, and then we buy it at another place and increase the Marseille connection. Or we cut off one country and give the traffic to another. Whoever is in the White House is part of what you call the Pepsi-Cola versus the Coca-Cola war, or the narcotic traffic war. And if you draw charts and diagram it, the organized crime syndicate changes faces, and there are a lot of things that happen in a narcotics war. A lot of buildings that catch fire, a lot of arsons, a lot of bombings, a lot of railroads, sabotage. The effect of a narcotics war just doesn't reach those top people at the very top level. It affects where you stay and where you are at the time that they decide to shoot or burn it out. Speaking of narcotics war, there's an article from the Associated Press yesterday. Ambassador Sinatra, a rumor in Rome. They're considering Frank Sinatra as the possible U.S. ambassador to Italy. Another article, Latin American drug barons are swimming in U.S. dollars, and has to do with Peruvian cocaine. Many people accuse me of believing that every death, or most deaths, are conspiracies. No, the ones I talk about often are what I call untimely deaths or possible intentional murders. But one woman just died this week, past week, December the 1st, who lived an old age and was a political activist. She's one of those rarities among us, and I mention this to you because I want to bring up her name, and also because some activists, as I say, do die in their sleep at an old age. This is Dorothy Day. She was 83 years old. She was jailed often. She was a fantastic political activist. I take her newspaper, the Catholic Worker Movement. I've been taking it for many years, and she was very close to Thomas Merton. That was a Trappist priest who was murdered in Southeast Asia. There's a new book about him, and I'll go into that later. She was a fine person, the finest that religion could produce, and if we had a lot more like her, then religion would be actually real and believable. It only is believable when you put it to use, and she was that kind of person. She did pass away last week. She was 83 and frail, but she worked up to the last, and many, many people will remember Dorothy Day and be grateful to her, just as I refer often to the group that fought the Lincoln Brigade in the Spanish Civil War against Franco, and also certain freedom fighters. One of them passed away this week, and I'll talk about him in Paris. Mr. Gary, the former husband of Jean Seberg, a sad double death at a time when they were beginning to expose the FBI and some of the ways those tentacles reach around the world and hurt all kinds of people. Dorothy Day died this week. It is the holidays, and before I go on further, I want to make some suggestions of gifts that you can give for the holiday. Of course, there's always books, and if you write to me, I'll send you a list of books that you can study the subjects that I talk about on this program, and all of you should at least own one of these. Some are paperbacks, they're not expensive. There's a big price range, but whatever you invest in them, you will get your money's worth. There's books on assassinations. Some books cover 2 or 3 assassinations in one book now. There's hundreds of books on the Kennedy assassination and about 40 good ones available. There's stories of the murder of Malcolm X, of Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy, the murder of Mary Jo Kopechne at Chappaquiddick, the shooting of George Wallace, the Marilyn Monroe connections to John Kennedy and the Mafia, the spy connections, the OSS, the CIA, the National Security Agency. This book's on the FBI, the Fourth Reich, and the Nazi connections, the mind control connections, and these overlap. Each book that's a specialty by itself overlaps into all the other categories. The Patty Hearst mind control case linked to Operation Chaos, coming out of Indiana again. The Charles Manson mind control, the cosmic connections and plans for space stations, the billionaire connections, the oil cartel connections, the Russian Tsarist connections, the Romanovs, Nosenko, Oswald, and the moles, the arms connections in the secret governments, all linking back again to Galen and Germany, the ruling class connections, the secret governments, the shills, the stooges, the lackeys, and the money and banking corporations, who gains and who loses by these manipulations. There are many books in stock available on all of these subjects, and if they interest you, send me a self-addressed stamped envelope, and I'll write and give you information about titles of things that you're interested to follow through if you listen to this program every week and study it and want to know more. There is something you have to do besides listening for an hour a week. To be free, you have to fight for it. You have to study it, and you have to invest your energy and your time and put other things aside to study. There's no easy way to be free. I've never heard of it, and if there is one, let me know. Now, in addition to buying books, I saw in today's paper, in the Sunday paper, some other Christmas presents that might interest you. There's a fly shooter you can get for $5.98. You hold it like a gun, and you spray it. It's a loaded plastic gun, and it shoots from 3 feet away to a fly. You can get a clock that goes backward for $21.98 and keep track of life that way. You can get a car John for $4.98 that you attach. Looks like a bell upside down that goes into a bottle if you're driving and don't want to stop at night. Or you can get a Frankenstein monster for $21.95, and he stands, you press a button by his feet, and you press that button, all of a sudden his pants drop, and he's wearing lace panties, and his hands go down to you know where, and his eyes light up. He's $21.98. Or you can buy one of those invisible dog collars for $9.98 and make it look like you're walking your dog. And there's even talking refrigerator sets for $12.98 that you put inside. When you open the door, it says, "You're eating again, no wonder you're fat." The one that worries me the most is the ad put in the back of the Liberty Lobby newspaper Spotlight, ash cache, the ash can for stoves and fireplaces that keeps the dust with the ashes, unique design of entry and holding a chamber to keep your ashes inside your can. $64 with a mail order. I just wonder. I empty my fireplace all the time and put the ashes in a plastic bag and take them out. But this ash cache looks a little bit dangerous. I think of Auschwitz, and maybe I'm getting too paranoid, but for $64 you can put somebody's ashes in that box. I don't know who they intend that for. I hope during the weeks that you're watching the various arsons and tragedies that are going on. I don't have time tonight to go into all of those, but I don't want you to think I'm passing them by. That tragedy at White Plains, New York, where 26 died and 24 injured, the convention of the electronics company and Nestle's, the MGM Grand Hotel. Similar, there have been many articles of the mysteries and similarities of these two arsons. 4 people have been murdered up at Point Reyes in California, and 7 altogether have been dead, according to a fellow that calls in. He says he hears inner voices. That goes, again, into the mind control sections. I guess we can do a profile of this young killer when he surfaces, who's getting these hikers and people on the beach. He will have been in Vietnam or in the military. He would have spent some time in a mental hospital. He would have come from a wealthy family and worked for the federal government a short time, such as a postal clerk or other work or police department, and he's associated with people in the federal government at some level, and he complains that he's hearing voices and he's directed to do it, and he'll be like Son of Sam and all the other California mind control zombies, or Mr. Gacy in Chicago. When he surfaces, they'll tell you he's hearing these inner voices we're already getting from phone messages. Arson suspected in Monterey, the famous Fisherman's Wharf down here at Monterey last Sunday night. When I was on the air, that restaurant was burning down, and they suspect arson. That was 4 doors from the tape center where these tapes, 1 set of them, are kept and duplicated. We keep tapes in a lot of places, in case you wonder, but there was a major $1.75 million fire 4 doors from there. Another suspect, crazy mystery gunman, held in San Pablo in the east part of California. There's been a series of little fires, big fires, arsons continuously going on. Alongside the MGM article is a story where some articles, the future of MGM, unsure after the fire. Another one, Kerkorian loses $68 million on his stock. The MGM Grand Hotel. Kerkorian was trying to gain control of Columbia Pictures Industries and lost $68 million at that fire. Another article, the second door in the MGM casino cage creates a flap. There was a door at the back of the hotel that some employees were glad to get through, but there wasn't supposed to be this second passage because It involves huge volumes of cash handled daily in the gambling industry. And when the fire came, according to one paper in the Los Angeles Times, they found a route for skimming money going out. So a lot of people were burned in that hotel, but I have every reason to believe that those 84 killed and many more burned and maimed are just part of the narcotic war described in the book that I'm talking about, and very visual if you begin through the years adding up what is happening and who is hitting the other person. You're going to see a lot of this as the transition team takes over. There will be more accidents and more spilling and more fires because these people know how to fight dirty, and we are the victims. In the middle, the insurance rates go up and the lives are lost. There was a fire in a San Francisco warehouse last week, $500,000 damages. There were 7 fires in Los Angeles at the end of November. 322 homes burned, 50,000 acres in the forest. There were 7 different fires, and they're looking for arson. A watershed alone cost $4 million. The rail collision in South Italy, 26 dead, 112 injured. These, again, are accidents just from the end of November, the last week in November, until today. Toll of South Korean airplane, November the 20th, crashed at the airport, 42 dead. Of course, the earthquake in Italy could not be prevented, but the mob has come in selling the coffins and the housing and is ripping the people off there. There was a fire in a Japanese hotel, November 23rd, 42 dead, 11 missing. It was only 55 rooms in 4 stories, and 42 people are dead. Isn't that a lot for a little dinky hotel? The FBI is working on a fire bombing in Reno, Nevada. They're still working on that at Harrah's Resort Hotel. The FBI can't find the bomber suspect where bombs went off at the Sacramento Airport, United Airlines, September the 9th. A wrecked truck spilled acid, November 27th in Coalinga, California, gallons of carbolic acid and chemical fumes that could be lethal. Long Beach peril, there was a fire where the Shell oil spilled and ignited and a river of flames went down the street. Interesting, a big fire in a Warsaw hotel, November 27, 1980. 14 trucks arrived. The Warsaw hotel was a big hotel. The restaurant, again, was gutted like the restaurants in upstate New York and at MGM. And guess what? No one died and no one injured in the Warsaw Hotel. Isn't that amazing that in Japan they could lose 42 people in a 4-story hotel and 11 missing, and not one person died in Warsaw, Poland. A truck exploded in Kenner, Louisiana with gasoline. A Newark, New Jersey, an arson fire, $15 million fire involving bribery, arson, and the largest supplier of government office furniture in the U.S. Indian Trail, North Carolina, November 27th, 55 people injured. Aerosol can factory exploded. 240 passengers on a cruise ship outside of Seattle, Washington, were taken off a stricken ship. Another ship went out and under just recently up there. It was a Swedish ship. Point raised, killing linked to Tamil Pies case. Again, I meant to bring that up before. They're trying to make these a ritualistic Manson type of murder where the psychological profile is coming in. And believe me, with all of these accidents and murders and spills, we'll get that Office of Emergency Service that Ronald Reagan and Nixon want so badly. Another fire on Cannery Row, a tragic fire out here that even made the New York Times, Steinbeck's famous Cannery Row. Officials believe arson the cause of a $1.5 million Cannery Row fire. We had Cannery Row, we also had the wharf last week. Cannery Row was bought by a member of the military and mob a long time ago. They bought this property and wanted to develop it so that local people that want to improve it, the restrictions were so high they couldn't do it, and they're trying to chase the local people out and make it a really big commercial project. Death car in Reno, a woman killed 6 and injured 25. This woman, again, had a very strange background. She was violently anti-Semitic. She worked for the Anti-Communist Ethics Foundation in Boise, Idaho. She blamed the Jews for many things that are going on in the world. And she was under psychiatric care in a Buffalo center where she talked about wanting to decapitate people and take a car and run into them and plow them down. So she comes out to Reno and takes a 1974 Lincoln Continental and drives through the busiest intersection and did a pretty good job. But she had a political background with an ex-husband who worked for the NAACP. She hated Jews, and I guess she hated his activity, and she did a very good job out there on the sidewalks of Reno tearing these people apart. And the derailment of another train in Illinois, an Amtrak train, and so forth. What about these arsons and fires? How many people die innocently? There was an article last week in the New York Times about selling property to a group of people and exposing organized crime, links to the Beverly Hills Supper Club that burned a while back. It took 165 lives, that club in Kentucky. And then the article goes on in the course of describing the organized crime ownership of this club. At the time of that fire, it was owned by the notorious Mo Dalitz, who again worked with Robert Mayu and Howard Hughes and is now running La Costa out in California. The Supper Club was purchased in 1967, as the New York Times said, long history of organized crime, burned down. A man recently went to jail as part of the fire or starting it, but the point is that the mob ran it and controlled it, and 165 people who go there to have a good time were burned to death in that club and couldn't get out. In Palo Alto, the home of the Stanford Institute, the emergency crews were training for disasters and drills and getting ready, as I say, for the Office of Emergency Service. Before I finish this program tonight, I want to give you the phone number of a station called Apology, area code 212-255-2748. You can call Apology, and there's an answering service, and when it answers, you can apologize for any crime that you've done. I called them up this week when I saw their number, and I said, this is Pat Nixon, and I want to apologize because Richard had a part in the killing of John Kennedy, and he's riddled with guilt, and I hope that you'll absolve him of this terrible crime. This organization, must be doing away with the Catholic Church or the confessions. This is the dial tone telephone booth confession box of the 1980s, and people are calling up and telling how they're homosexuals, how they've murdered themselves, and the idea of apology is to provide a way for people to apologize for their wrongs against people without jeopardizing themselves. This is in the Washington Post. Apology will automatically tape record your anonymous phone call. Do not identify yourself and call from a payphone to prevent tracing your call. Describe in detail what you have done and how you feel about it. And you give your statements, and when the call's collected, they will be played to the public at a time and a place, and they will advertise. Now, I wonder if they'll advertise Pat Nixon's call that she apologized for Richard Nixon's crime. So if you want these played at a public time and you want to apologize for some public official who's committed the crime of murdering the president or the senator, the civil rights leaders, or leading us to World War III, or setting fire to buildings in order to get even with another mobster or so forth, call Apology. That's 212-255-2748. Give them a ring, and don't be bashful. You can be Marina Oswald apologizing for lying about your husband when you knew you were both agents and you came to this country to make a lot of money, and you want your citizenship now. And she said last week she's been very quiet for 17 years. Or you can call up and say, I'm Mrs. John Connolly, and I want to apologize for John, who talks in his sleep about inviting John Kennedy to Dallas, Texas, when he knew he was going to be murdered. And I should have told the Warren Commission, but I didn't want to tell them because I was embarrassed. It wouldn't be patriotic. You can get your Noxie together and call this number. Each of you that is listening or has a tape cassette could invest. After 11 o'clock, it's very cheap, or before 8 in the morning, it's very cheap. And you can apologize for them for one of their crimes. Just or use a payphone. As I say, I called as Pat Nixon. I used my home phone So that if that call comes through, that's one way of my checking to see if the house is plugged, because I'm sure I'll never hear from Apology again. And if I do, we'll know where that came from. 212-255-2748. Next week and in the weeks to come, I have a few articles, about 50 or 60 right now, of things that I said would happen that came true. We'll wind up 1980 with sort of a I told you so, just as in 1972 I said Ronald Reagan would follow Richard Nixon. I thought Spiro Agnew would have his term before Reagan, but Nixon saw to it that he got out. But I'm going to do about 50 articles, hopefully the next 2 to 3 weeks, that are in the news this week or later than this week, just the November 25th, the December headlines or stories of I told you so, where I predicted things that all came true in the last week. Now, that's a good feeling. A private researcher, an independent person with no outside funds to support me, just using my own intelligence and noxy, reading books and articles and listening to people, being interviewed by people, going wherever I could or could afford to meet other researchers. You can see events from the past that shape your future. And when certain events come down, such as the MGM hotel burning the way it did, you know before the confession begins or the investigators come in, arson was there. Once you see a pattern, once you study patterns of history, you know what's happening that next day, and you also know how to predict the future. Now, that is the joy of doing the research. It is a sad world. I read those horrors of different countries, like Somalia and Uganda and various countries where there's genocide or torture. There are bad things happening, but there are also good things. And once you set your course of what you want to do with your life, you can make the good things happen. There are a lot of people writing books, exposing, sharing information. And as we go into 1981, and I'll make that transition from tonight for the next 3 weeks, we have to think seriously about the future and not be crybabies when things come down, but be determined to take some control of our lives. And the best way to do that is to listen and study and talk with other people. In the meantime, I've got to close. Our time is up. I'll be back with you next week. This is Mae Brussell in Carmel, California.
This has been World Watchers International with noted conspiracy investigator Mae Brussell. This program originates from Carmel, California.